Today on B.Hooked Crochet, we're going to crochet the Make Waves Throw by Red Heart Yarns. For the supplies list and pattern, click on the little icon in the top right corner of your screen, or you can find the link in the description below. I'm your host Brittany, and I'm so glad to be working with my friends at Red Heart to bring you this tutorial for their gorgeous design. We'll get started right after this. We're going to start off our throws with a foundation chain of 88. So to do that, we need to create a slip knot, and I'm leaving myself a nice long tail so I can weave it in at the end. Place that loop on your hook and pull it tight. And that loop on our hook never counts as our first chain. We're going to wrap the working yarn and pull that through the loop. That'll be our first chain. We want to make these chains a little bit loose as directed by the pattern. So to do that, I'm just allowing the yarn to really flow through my hand here, and as I pull the yarn through, I'm sort of using my hook to release a little tension on that loop to pull it up a little bit larger than I normally would. Now go ahead and make 88 chains. Once you have your 88 chains, we're ready to start on row 1, and this pattern is actually very simple. We only have one row that we repeat over and over to finish the length of our afghan. So we're starting with row 1. This is sort of like our foundation row to get us started, and we need to locate the 4th chain from the hook. Now I'm looking at it from this side view because I like to work my stitches in the back bump of the chain, so that little hump that you see there, that's where I work my stitches, because when you do that, it exposes this nice pretty braid on the side of the work. So this is sort of your edge, and it's a little bit cleaner that way. So I'm just going to count 1, 2, 3, and 4. So I'm going to hold on to that with my thumb, flip it over, and I'm going to work a double crochet into that 4th chain from the hook. Now the 3 chains that we skipped, we're counting that as our first double crochet. Next, we're going to make 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 chains. The next thing we're going to do from here is work a double crochet 3 together, and that's because we're working in the valley of the chevron. So you can think of a chevron stitch as peaks and valleys. It goes up, it comes down, it goes up and comes down. We're right here in one of the lower sections. So once we get through the shaping of this, this is sort of going down this peak here, and then we're going to come back up. To work that double crochet 3 together, we're going to first yarn over, and then we'll find that next chain that's available to work into. Insert your hook there, pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through 2, and then we're going to leave that there. Yarn over again, insert your hook into the next chain, pull up a loop, then yarn over and pull through 2. We're going to leave that there as well, and we'll yarn over, insert our hook into the next chain, pull up a loop, yarn over, and pull through 2. And now we have 4 loops on our hook. We're going to yarn over and pull through all 4 of those loops. So we have turned those 3 chains into 1, and that pulls the work into the shape that we want it to be in. Next, we're going to make 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 chains. So we are working back up that next little peak. Now once we work those next 4 stitches, we can really start to see the shape. That's exactly what we want. So the last step is to work the point up the top of the peak. We're going to do that by making 3 double crochets in the same chain. So we're just going to locate the next chain that's available and double crochet 3 times in the same space. Now your chain will stretch out a little bit here. That's totally normal. You want to minimize it as much as possible. So you can see I'm really holding on to the work with my thumb as I do that, because when we naturally work the stitch, it's easy for us to put a lot of tension on that yarn and to pull it. So once I get my yarn over through here, I just sort of pinch it with my thumb. I'm still allowing this yarn to go through my hands, but I'm just making sure I don't put any extra stress on the stitch as I'm pulling the loop through the loop on my hook. So with this little section, we've covered the entire repeat for the rest of row 1. We're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 chains. That's going to get us down the side of this peak that we're on here. And then we'll work through that little valley section by working a double crochet 3 together. We'll follow that up with a double crochet into the next 4 chains, and then work the point with 3 double crochets in the same chain. So go ahead and finish working your repeat for row 1. We'll meet back up at the end of this row and we'll talk about how to start off the next row. Once you're nearing the end of your row, we're going to pick back up where we have our last double crochet 3 together. The next thing that we're going to do is work up the next peak, but we're stopping there right at the end. So we're going to work 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 chains, so just like we have been doing, and we should have 1 chain remaining at that point. In the last chain, we want to make 2 double crochets. Now, if your first row hasn't worked out this way, if you have too few or too short chains, just go back and check over your work. Make sure that your pattern repeat is as it's given to you in the pattern. So make sure you have 4 double crochets in between your corners. So the bottom little valley and the peak up at the top, you need to have 3 double crochets. So you could have done something wrong on this first row. If that's the case, you can rip back to that point and just fix it and move on. If your problem is within the number of foundation chains, then there's a couple things you can do. You can either rip back a little bit and work 2 double crochets in the same chain on one of the straight edges. That's going to get around frogging the entire thing and having to start all over again. Or that is the other alternative, just frog back. Make sure that you do have your correct number of foundation chains, which is 88 for this pattern. Now we're moving on to row number 2, and this is the repeat for the entire pattern. So we're going to repeat row 2 for the entire length of our throw, and we're going to start off that row by making 3 chains. This is going to count as our first double crochet. So then we'll just turn our work. And next we're going to make a double crochet in the same stitch that our chain 3 is coming from. And since that chain 3 is counting as a stitch, we have 2 stitches in this first one. Now the next thing we're going to do is make 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches, and I'm catching both loops of the V. The next thing we're going to do is double crochet 3 together, and you should have yourself situated so that you have 1 double crochet and then you have your double crochet 3 together and then 1 more. So we're going to work this decrease over these next 3 stitches. So we're doing that the same way as we did before. Yarn over and pull up a loop in that first stitch, and then pull through 2 and repeat that again. For the double crochet 3 together, this stitch can throw people off a little bit. Just look for the V up at the top of the work and insert your hook into that V. That'll get you in the right spot. And then work that again in the next stitch. When you have 4 loops on your hook, we're going to yarn over and pull through all 4. And we have completed that double crochet 3 together. We've maintained our shape there, which is exactly what we are going for. And the next thing we're going to do is make 1 double crochet into each of the next 4 stitches. Now the next thing we're going to do is find the next stitch and just a little visual cue. It's going to be the middle of that group of 3. You always want to make sure we're positioning this increase here in the same spot. So we're going to double crochet 3 times in that next stitch. And that's the repeat for row 2. So we really haven't changed anything as far as what stitch we're doing and the increments that we're doing it in. It's just worded slightly differently because now we're working in stitches rather than chains like we did on that foundation chain. So go ahead and repeat this sequence, what we've just did here, 5 more times. It's going to get us to the end of the row, and I'll show you how to finish things up for row 2. Once you've made it to the end of the second row, we finished up our double crochet 3 together. I've worked my last 4 double crochets just up that next peak, and the last stitch is our chain 3. Now we don't want to forget this one because we are counting these chain 3s as a stitch, so that means we have to work into it at the end of the row. Well, on the last stitch we need to make 2 double crochets in that 3rd chain. And I'm just looking at it here from the back side, so that's the back bump of the chain, and if you turn it over you can see the V. Now you can work in any 2 loops that you prefer and just work 2 double crochets in that chain. Now all we need to do at this point is repeat that last row until our throw measures approximately 46 inches from this bottom or starting edge here. Or you can make any adjustments if you'd prefer a longer throw. You can add it a little bit longer. If you want a shorter one, you can make fewer repeats of that row. So the next thing we'll do when we come back is I'm going to demonstrate how to weave in your ends, because that's going to be the last piece of the puzzle to finishing our throw. Once you've finished crocheting the length of your afghan, then we're ready to fasten off. We can just take our scissors, and you'll want to leave yourself a tail that's about 8 inches long. We're going to use that to weave it in, and then you'll just pull the tail through the loop on your hook. So let's have a look at how to weave in ends. The first thing you'll need to do is decide what is the front and the back side of your afghan. Now this is a reversible stitch pattern, so it looks the same on both sides, but you do want to designate a front and a back side, so that way when you weave in your ends, you're consistently weaving them in on the wrong side, because I'm sure you have several ends to weave in from adding new skeins of yarn. So I have what I have called the wrong side of my afghan facing up, and I'm going to just thread one of the ends on my darning needle. I'm working on this tail end here, and since we're coming from the top of the stitch here, I just want to work it down to the base of the stitches. So I'm just going to go in through these little side loops and work the tail down, so that way I can have easy access to this row of stitches. And then I'm just going to run my darning needle under the stitches, as many as I can, and pull that through. And then it's always a good idea to go back in the other direction. So I'm going to skip this little loop here because if I go back through it, I'm just undoing what I did. So I'm going to skip that and then work the tail under the same row of stitches, but I'm also being very sloppy with this. I'm not trying to go underneath the loops in a neat way, because if you split the yarn, if you split those fibers with the tail, then it's going to have a lot better of a chance to stay in than if it's woven in neatly. I mean, you want to be able to pull on it and the end not come out. So if you have enough tail, you can go back in the other direction. Again, you'll skip that last loop so you don't undo what you just did and work it through. And once it's nice and secure, you can just trim off that tail. Now to finish off your afghans, you'll just need to repeat that for your other ends.